Welcome back to the DomainSherpa Network. This is the Digital Fortune Podcast, and today my guest is Jason Sheppard. Jason is a fellow domain investor, and we talk about all things domains. We discuss drop catch. We discuss building a portfolio from zero to a few thousand names. We discuss some of the challenges today and buying kind of names on the lower end of the spectrum in the $10 to $100 range, and what's the best method of doing so, and some strategies and some venues. We talk about Jason's portfolio sale this year, and a few of his other individual sales. I don't think it's very often that you get to hear about a portfolio sale of this size. I know people have heard of the sales that go to GoDaddy, the big sales, the March X's, and all those kind of sales, but not the smaller kind of portfolio sales. So that's an interesting discussion. And we talk about lots of the little things that us domainers like to talk about. So I hope you enjoy the show. If you do enjoy the show, please be sure to also give a shout out and check out our sponsors, domainsmoke.com, digitalstartup.com, secretbrokerage.com, and dan.com. Without any further ado, let's get into the show. And I really appreciate you guys listening. Hey everyone, and welcome back again to Domain Sherpa, and this is the Digital Fortune Podcast. Today I'm joined by Jason Sheppard, fellow domain investor and friend, and excited to have you, Jason.
Hey Josh, great to be here.
Yeah, so thanks for jumping on. I know I only mentioned it to you a couple of days ago, but you're super flexible, and I appreciate that.
Oh, my pleasure.
Yeah, no, I've been meaning to have you back for a little while, ever since, we talk quite regularly, for those of you that, listening and don't know, but Jason is a part of a group of investors where we chat pretty regularly about, domains and strategies and all kinds of different things, all kinds of different topics. So, I stay up to date with Jason quite a bit. I figured that we could come up here and kind of catch up and talk about what's been happening and what's to come.
Sure, glad to.
Cool. So, how's the year been going for you in general?
It's been a really amazing year. January started out very, very strong. I had set a goal for this year to eclipse my total sales to date through the end of 2020. As some of you may know, and I know you're aware, I kind of pivoted to more of a full-time domainer in 2020. When COVID hit, the DJing kind of went away. And so 2020 was a really good year. And I actually hit lifetime sales of 200,000, a little bit over 200,000 by the end of the year. And my goal this year was to have more than that total in this year alone. And remarkably, between a very strong January, a solid February, and a portfolio sale in March, I hit my goal for the year in March.
Yeah.
So I had to make new goals.
That's unbelievable. That's exactly what we want, right? I mean,
yeah.
I can't think of anything better. And you know what? I'm in the same boat. I was, obviously I want to get better year over year. I, surpassed my goal in March as well. So I'm in the same boat as you. You only got started really investing in domains like 2019. And that was on a part-time basis. And then, you got full-time in 2020. Is that about right?
Yeah, I mean, I traced it back, and there were a few domains I bought in 2017 that were, I had bought with the mind of investing, and then 2018 I had some, but I mean, like in January of 2019, that was my first NamesCon. My partner had come on in December, late December, early January. And so really realistically, that's when it got started. I think my portfolio was probably like 400, 500 names at that point. So, I
Yeah.
mean, I did have, some history, a little bit of time in the industry, but yeah, really 2019 is where I kind of hit my stride and really started focusing on it.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because a lot of people are in the spot of getting started at the moment, a lot more than I would say probably ever before. How do you go from zero to, 5,000 names, I guess is which are a ballpark of where you're at or where you've been at. How do you go from zero? Like what's the when you started getting serious in January 2019, was it, how did you scale up quickly? Were you looking in GoDaddy? Were you looking at Dropcatch? Like was it hand registrations mostly? How do you go from such a, literally know nothing, have no domains to building up a portfolio that actually has value?
Well, the the process was gradual, but then you hit times where you're like, whoa, did I really add 600 domains to my portfolio in this 1 month? And the bulk of my names are discount drops at Dropcatch. There's a fair number of pre-release names in the portfolio, but realistically, huge, and those would be typically huge domains drops. They don't drop as good of names anymore. I don't know, something about what what they decided to cast off. But it seems like now you have to wade through like 90% first name last names to find any gems in there, and the cost benefit just isn't really there. But I still find that the discount drops are just really prime for mining. And it's kind of a process where I put in a certain number a day, not expecting to get all of them,
Yeah.
because other people are going to bid more. Partner, aka Huge Domains, is going to preempt some of them if you don't put in a full price back order. And then I still do some full price back orders. It's just kind of depends on the quality of the name and or what I think the competition for it's going to be. I mean, there are names that I see, I'm like, I would love that name, but I don't think I need to do a full price back order on it because I think it's going to fly under Huge Domains radars and other investors' radar.
Mm. Yeah, that's interesting. When you do your back order, I'll say from my perspective, when I go from discount to full back order, it's like the gap is kind of strange for me because I normally stop at around like $20 to $21 from a discount back order standpoint. But then obviously the gap between $20 and $21 to 59 is actually quite significant. Do you ever discount back order for like 30 or 35?
Never. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah, me neither.
the only thing I might do that on would be a like a .NET that I really wanted.
Hmm.
Like I would consider bumping up a .NET because I have a hard time paying $60 for any .NET that's dropping.
Yeah.
But there are some that might come across that I'm like, hey, wouldn't mind throwing that in the portfolio. It's not a premium one word, but it's a something like I can remember this, and I'm not saying I bid 30 on it, but I mean, like I picked up pronghorn.net. Pronghorn is an animal, single word animal, and it's a single word. It's
Yeah.
not like prong horn,
Yeah.
and so it's not the best animal. It's not like having elephant, but it's an animal, and it's a one word, and so something like that I would bid higher than usual. But I kind of use my bid as a limiting factor. So if I identify 100 names, and there are plenty of days that I identify 100 names, I may put them all in low to limit myself because
Mm.
I may not want to get 100 names, but I may want to get what I can of those.
Yeah.
So if I want them all, I'm going to bump it up above the minimum or above, the lower teens. Um, yeah, I totally get what you're saying though. The gap, like to me, if you get up to like even close to 20, I'm like, yeah, the long term holding difference in between 20 and 60, it- it's not. I would rather pay the 60. If I like it enough to pay 20, I like it enough to pay 60 pretty
Yeah.
much.
Yeah, me
I mean,
too. it happens pretty often where so I get quite aggressive on the back orders at 59 now and at the $60 just because I want to be sure that I win it. And then when I win it and it's uncontested, I kind of think to myself, could I have done 25 there?
No, exactly. I mean, like the worst is if I'm rushing. Like if it's like 1:15 and I don't have my list prepared and I'm not doing the good call, I'm like, oh man, these all look good. I'm just throw them in full price. And then
Yeah, like today, huh? Like today, like
yeah,
after the show.
yeah, after the show, exactly. And then and it's what's crazy though is that on the discount drops, sometimes like right now, their Dynadot has a special for $6.99 registrations. So at that point, it becomes okay. Well, instead of putting in 100 of these, let me see how many of them make it through, and I'll get them at $6.99, and I can save my cost and cut down on my cost basis.
Yeah.
And so some days I'll do that. And then that gives me an extra. Then I'm like, all right, well, if it made it all the way through, am I missing something? Is it not as good as I thought it was? And then so that might be a limiting factor too. I mean, the thing that I've kind of discovered is that there's no dearth of inventory. There's plenty of inventory
Yeah.
out there.
Yeah.
And if you're well capitalized, you could go from zero inventory to, huge domains in a matter of years. But I have to take it a little easier than that because you don't want to overextend yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree with you. There is a ton of inventory for the portfolio model. I think that it's difficult for a lot of people to understand like what actually is a good domain and what isn't, because sometimes it's just hard to tell. Like you cannot really tell unless you've sold a lot of names, I would say, in a lot of cases, because you look at the stats and there's a lot of good names that are registered in one extension that would be good for, a portfolio. There's a lot of domains, that are plurals that might be good to put in a portfolio. But, so a lot of like the standard rules that we talk about from like mid-tier standpoint don't really apply to portfolios when you're trying to, acquire a bunch of names in the, $10 to $50 range. I think that it comes down to a little bit of knowing what sells and what doesn't, right?
Oh, absolutely. And I had this conversation with Mike Seiger the other day. I'm like, there are names that on paper do not seem like good names, but I can look at those names and be like, that name will sell. I know
Yeah.
it's going to sell.
Yeah.
And I think the exact example I gave him was an early one that sold in mine, and it was machinepop.com. No idea what you're going to use it for, but I'm like, machine pop, somebody will buy that, and sure enough, it sold.
Yeah.
And we actually, we looked at some of the metrics, and there's no compelling reason to buy that name to resell it.
Yeah.
Other than just the way it sounds and a gut feeling that I think that's something that somebody would buy. And it's that's the case a lot of times. And then the opposite's true too. I just had a recent sale of a 4word.com that I re-registered. In other words, it dropped and I registered it by hand that same day. Didn't put in a discount back order or anything on it.
Nobody went for it, huh?
Right. And it was gameonplayon.com. It was, I normally wouldn't buy that, but it was registered in 8 extensions. And that's something that I've learned from you is that, when you get up into the high single digits or the low double digits on extensions, that means that it seems obvious, but that the demand is going to be a little greater than something that has one. And I have plenty of domains that are only registered in the extension I own, but those are going to be brandables that I thought up or that were dropped that I liked and I felt would sell, because I think sometimes with a brandable, it's almost a benefit to have fewer registrations because you're trying to carve out your own brand on that. But this one, I just, I was like, all right, well, it's a hand registration. It's registered in 8, and it sold so quickly that I had to push it to the after Nick escrow account.
How much did it sell for?
$3,400, and
3,400.
and that was a negotiated sale. I had for whatever reason, I think probably just because of the number of extensions it was registered in, I'd listed it around 5K with like a 2,400 minimum. And after Nick negotiated it, the brokers negotiated 3,400 for me.
That was
So,
game on, play on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Game on, play on.
Yeah. I mean, I'm kind of surprised that didn't get picked up on a discount back order. I mean, to be honest, with 8 extensions taken, for me, sometimes when I'm trying to filter through names and I don't have as much time as usual, I'll like limit it to maybe like 3 words instead of 4 words or something like that. So that might be like one reason why it slipped through. But still 8 extensions and to slip through and not even get a discount back order is kind of surprising to me.
Yeah, I mean, and that's probably the outlier, but and that's the whole reason I bought it, because I usually filter for my first pass is usually 2 names, because I mean, realistically, I mean, you can do 1, but then you're gonna get lulled into saying, oh, it's a word, but it's not a good word. So I usually filter by 2. And then I might flip the filter for 3 and just see if there's anything, that catches my eye. It's not too long or makes real good sense.
Yeah.
Or is a good, just a good phrase. I mean, last year I sold "You Are Brave." Something like
I love that name.
that. Yeah, I mean, it's just like that's gonna miss a lot of people's filters, because they're gonna be looking for 2 words, and I'm like, "You are brave." I mean, yeah, it's not. I don't know what the buyer's doing with it. I haven't checked, but I mean, that's just a great name. I mean, you could do a lot with that, and so yeah. But the filtering on a daily basis is just. I mean, you can spend so much time doing it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree with you. So, I mean, I turn a lot to drop catch, snap names for, names in that sub $100 range. I used to be really heavy. I was talking to Dennis about this. I used to be really heavy in closeouts as well, but I don't feel like I get the same quality closeouts at $50 than I would get at drop catch for like a discount back order, to be honest. So I've turned away from GoDaddy a little bit. How about you?
I was to your conversation with Dennis, and I've had a little bit of the opposite situation,
Okay.
and it's really just been the last few weeks, and I'm still trying to figure out what the triggers are for everybody, because I'll see something that I like and it's counting down. Oh, there was one yesterday. I can't think of what it was. Oh, I know what it was. Yesterday I was draftville.com. And I'm sitting there and I'm watching it. I'm like, do I let it go to 50, or do I put in a $12 bid and see if I can snag it for 20 today, instead of having to wait till tomorrow or wait till it gets down? Because I think if it gets to 50, you got a really good chance of getting it at 40 or 30.
Yeah, I agree.
But then I think the buying pressure comes in on that $11 drop, because that's a big drop from 30 to 11. And so but I have bought a number of names at 30, 40, and a couple at 50. And I'm typically, the ones I'm buying there are ones that are pre-approved for Brand Bucket.
Oh, okay.
And then I'm not going to get into a lot of detail, because it's, there's a limited number of those, but there are ways to determine if a name has already been approved on Brand Bucket. May have gone through the cycle, may have been dropped by an investor, could have been purchased by an end user that eventually went out of business. But if I see one of those and I know that it's approved at a $2,000 or above on Brand Bucket, a lot of times I'll pay the 50, or maybe wait for the 40 or the 30. But yeah, so on Draftville yesterday, I loved the name. I thought it was one that I might be able to snag. So I let it get down to like 3 minutes, and I put a single bid in on it. And like 30 seconds later, I put in a proxy, because I didn't want to put in 12 and then put another bid and possibly see somebody notice the multiple bids. So I put in like a decent proxy, like around 50. I put in $49. I was like, let me just see this experiment, because I'm contemplating waiting on it for 50. So I'll put 49 in as my proxy. And if somebody, takes a little stab at it at the last minute, maybe I'll outlast them. Did not happen. Somebody bid at like under 3 minutes, and it wound up going for like mid 100s. And I think I bowed out around 155. And I don't even think it was, I don't think it was huge domains either. So it's just it's just such a, there's so many nuances to trying to get these names. Because had I waited 3 more minutes and let it go to closeout, I feel like there's a very good chance I could have gotten that for $50.
Yeah, if huge domains didn't enter the auction, then yeah, you probably could have. But there's there's not just huge domains. I would say there's at least 3 to 5 other sniping bots, maybe a couple more. And yeah, I don't know. It is a bit of a gamble. I would say that the quality of names that do go without any kind of bids is actually really high. But if they're not taken by someone who's manually checking, a couple minutes after, and they're not taken by a bot, they are taken pretty quickly after that, within hours. So if you're going like if you're at like the end of the day saying, okay, I'm going to check the closeouts,
yeah,
by that time it's, in my opinion, it's close to too late. But
yeah, I can see that.
Yeah. But
so I brought
like you said, there are still names that they don't get picked up at 50, and if they don't get picked up at 50, there's a good chance you can get them at 30. But yeah, I don't know. It's, for me, I'm not seeing the same level of names that I was seeing, maybe this time last year for $11.
Yeah, and that could be the case, because last year I was very focused on huge domains and the discount drops, and I wasn't really playing in the closeouts as much. So I don't have as much to compare it to. But the way I look at it now is, if a name that hits closeout at 50, if that is a name that if I saw I would put in a full price drop for it, then I don't have a problem buying
Yeah, exactly.
because at that point the price is the same for all intents and purposes.
Yeah.
And I think there are names that hit there. I like the fact that names that go to drop typically, haven't gone through the expert, that I would put in a discount back order for at drop catch, haven't gone through GoDaddy's system.
Yeah.
So many of the expiring names go through GoDaddy's auction platform that I think I was probably missing out on some quality by not looking at it more than I did.
Yeah, the great thing about GoDaddy expiry, stream, is that you retain the age of the domain, which does have value. How much value? It's debatable, but there is certainly some value to retaining the age of the domain, because I think, just from my perspective, I think from like a buyer's standpoint, they can look and they can see, hey, this domain is 10, 15 years old. I'm not purchasing a domain that was recently registered. And I think that for the psyche, that makes a difference for the savvy buyer that knows to look at who is. Now, does that mean that most of the buyers are going to look at who is and look at domain age? Probably not. But
right,
here and there will be a few. So I think that particularly on the mid-tier names, that makes a difference. Yeah, I don't know. Talking about mid-tier names, Jason, are you how are you doing in that department? Are you buying names in that kind of, let's say, 250 to 2,500 range?
I've started buying some, but I don't have the confidence level in my ability to judge those as well as I do on the lower end. And honestly, like I said earlier, I've had a pretty good year, so I had a little bit of funds to play with. I started buying some better names than maybe I would have last year. And it gets to a point where if I spend $1,000 on a name and I think to myself, I could have gotten 80 discount drops for this.
Yeah.
And you look at the sell-through rate, and I'm like, all right, well, I know what the sell-through rate is on the type of names that I get. I mean, the discount drops sell at a pretty consistent 1.2%. I mean,
Hmm.
that's just what I've found on the type of names that I buy. And so, you just have to work out the math. And it's like, all right, so is the sell-through rate times the average sale price on the 80 names I could get for the same price as this one better name going to make more sense in the long term than buying this one name? And I'm a strong believer that you have to have a kind of a little bit of a bifurcated portfolio. So I do want to have better names, but I mean, it's hard for me to make that leap,
Hmm.
and I start second guessing myself. I mean, I'm looking right here. I mean, at some of the names I bought recently. I mean, Field Ranger for $470. Picked it up the other day. Not delivered yet, so hopefully I'll have it before this airs and somebody doesn't go renew it.
Hey, that's a
So
good name.
I mean, I feel like it's a good name too. But like I don't have the ultimate confidence level that I'm going to sell that at, you know, 10 to 20x in the same time that I could sell the same dollar amount of worth of the discount drops that I got for the same amount.
Hmm.
And but at the same time, you do have the bigger sales on these. I mean, I can't say the name, but we just sold in my partnership portfolio a name for 38,000 that we paid $800 for in 2019. So, that's a pretty significant return on that type of thing.
Yeah.
So, but what's the sell through rate on that? We've owned it for 3 years now, or 2+ years now. So, and there's a bunch of others in the similar price range that we own. So it's just one of those things where I'm always tinkering with the mix, and that's kind of where I'm at right now.
What do you think about pricing those type of names? Because I've gone back and forth on this recently because, I've typically priced up to 50K. Sometimes I've priced up to 100K. But I'm starting to feel like that's not the move. Like in this market, I feel like the moonshots are coming through a lot more often than usual. Meaning, like if like a name that I would have priced at 25K, I feel like more often than not right now that 25K buyer may have paid like 100, 150, it's like I'm seeing this way too frequently to not take notice of.
Yeah, I mean, I go through that too. Especially, typically, I go through it when I get a Dan or an After Nick email,
Yeah,
and I look at a name and I'm like, yeah, I've got $40 in this name, acquisition and some renewals and transfers or whatever. But man, I feel like that could have been a 5-figure name, and I'm getting 3,400 or 4,500 or 5K for it. So it's a tough call because you want to have some deal flow, but you don't want to miss out on some moonshots. And it's just it's the ever, you're always, like I said, tinkering. You're just trying to play around with it and finding the sweet spot.
yeah.
Um, but I don't have the definite answers either. But I do take notice of some of the things that you're talking about as well. Seeing some of these names, and you're like, you got what for what?
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, exactly. And you just can't get that price you've got the name, if you've got the name priced. I guess you could have it priced at like a moonshot price tag, but I think there's something powerful to, particularly with the mid-tier names, to just not having them priced and looking at it on a case by case basis when the market is hot,
Yeah,
particularly when the market is hot. Because I just think that when when the right buyer comes along, uh, at the moment, I think we're seeing a lot of buyers that are flooded with cash, and more willing to, I would say, overpay for names. And I think that when the market goes, down a little, I think it's probably a better strategy to have more of those names priced more reasonably. But yeah, I do wonder if there is, something to be said about adjusting your strategy based on how the market is performing. And, I think we can all agree the market's performing very, very well at the moment.
yeah, no, I totally agree. And I actually downloaded some data from Name Bio to the point where I hit my monthly limit, and I'm waiting for May 1st to finish pulling the data and analyze it. But I was just looking at some of the retail sales from from like Name Pull and and buy domains and domain market. And I was focusing in on some of the upper ones, and I wanted to basically see, when Mike Mann sells these names for 50,000 that I would have priced for 3,500, what is the defining characteristic about the names that he has at that price? That, if is there something about those names that I can identify and price some subset of my names at that, so that I'm not missing out on at least some of that. Now, the fact it may just be that he's got, 500,000 of those names priced at that price, but there's something about the ones that sell, and I want to kind of reverse engineer his
Yeah.
sales. The head scratching sales, the ones that we see him talk about on Twitter, and you're like, how does he get that for that name? I want to reverse engineer those and price some number of mine similarly and see how it does.
So I think that as domain investors, we're conditioned to look at naming conventions as brands and whether the brand is good or bad. And actually, I think that strategy is not always good, because it doesn't represent where the money is always, right? So I think that when you look at like some of these like head scratcher sales, for me at least, one thing that I do notice is that they're typically in you can place them in an industry that typically that has like a lot of cash available, meaning like they're big industries, right? So like a somewhat decent brand that is targeting care or health or something like that, that maybe you price in the $5,000 range. I think that those type of names you can more easily moonshot, because if the right buyer comes along and they're in the health industry and they're making tons of cash, the actual like value of that brand is not so important as what it's worth to them and what they're doing. And I think that if they've got a lot of cash on hand, that makes sense. I mean, that's my kind of thought process. I think that we as domain investors should be looking at the industry that it's targeting, and putting some maybe heavier weight on that when it comes to pricing.
Yeah, yeah, and I don't disagree on that. And I think that as domain investors, a lot of times we fall into traps. We're like, oh, this is a legal name. It's lawyers make a lot of money, and I think that we all know they don't like to spend it either.
Yeah.
But you're right. Something like healthcare, or something like some of the some of the tech industries, that these domain prices that we think are moonshots are rounding errors on their marketing budget.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
if it's the name they want, I mean, yeah, they may have people that are incentivized to try and get it cheaper, but at the end of the day, if they've decided on it, and yeah, they're going to probably end up buying it.
Yeah, like an example would be for me, like let's say like a good two-word name ending in health, something like Evergreen Health, right? I mean, like Evergreen is obviously a very popular brand. Evergreen obviously is a brand name that kind of works quite well with health. I would say that most of the time, you know, domain investors would price that. They would typically price that name, and they would typically probably price it in the five-figure range. But the reality is that if there is a buyer for that domain, it's not unreasonable to assume that they're going to pay. They could be willing to pay 200K for it. But it's just very rare that an investor like myself or you price a name like that high. I would say that that's probably something that I could adjust and do better when it comes to my strategy, is kind of just like looking at that and saying, okay, it's only taken in 15 extensions, or whatever, but let's go a little deeper, right?
Hmm. Yeah, I agree completely. I feel like I price my lower tier names too low, but also my higher tier names, and I don't
Yeah.
have that many of the higher tier. But I mean, it's just that you got that moonshot thing, and then you're like, yeah, but how long is it going to take? But then you get the one, or you see one, and you're like, yeah, it's worth it. So just trying to figure out the names that it makes sense to do that on is, I
Mm,
mean, that's the trick.
yeah.
And doesn't sound like the solution is obvious.
No.
You just have to spend time in the industry and get a feel for it.
Yeah, 100%. I don't know about you, but I feel like I'm still learning every day, and I don't even feel like I'm even close to filling up the tank. It's just like there's so much to learn as you kind of progress in this industry.
Yeah, and you really have to be able to try things and evaluate them. I mean, a perfect example is, I was if you had asked me 3 months ago, I would have told you, yeah, I'm building up my parking portfolio because I want to have parking revenues that pay for my renewals on the rest of my portfolio. Then, I looked and ran the numbers and said, well, absent of being able to identify drops that will earn the buying names that park, you're going to pay 24 to 30 months worth of their revenues. And I just ran the math and I was like, for the money that it would take me to buy enough parking revenue names to support my portfolio, I could buy the type of names that I buy all day long and sell at 1.2% sell through rate and earn more money. So
Mm,
I completely pivoted. Like I was all in on parking 4 months ago, and I'm down to just parking like 100 names now. And
mm,
and they're ones that just I know they're going to pay their own way, and that if somebody wants them, they're going to find them. Whether or not they have a go directly to a landing page, a for sale landing page or not. So yeah, I mean that's the thing. As you learn, as your knowledge grows, you have to be able to make adjustments based on what you've ascertained from
yeah,
trying
yeah,
these things.
yeah. That's good insight. I mean, I dabbled a little bit in parking this year as well. I parked for about, I don't know, 45 to 60 days just because I wanted to figure out if there was any revenue there. I mean, super minimal. I mean, I parked, I don't know, 2,500 names or something like that, generated like, I don't know, a couple $100, like really like not enough to make it worthwhile. And the only thing is that I will say is that I got quite a lot of sales through Afternic, more sales than usual through Afternic when I parked my landers. I don't know if there's like some kind of psyche there that says like, oh, there's advertising on this domain now. I want to lock it up. But I did, rather than getting a decrease in sales, I got an increase through Afternic. So I don't know.
So the 2,500 names you feel like that you parked, the sell through rate on those 2,500 you feel like went up when you started parking them?
It did go up. I mean, it's really hard for me to like take away anything like concrete from that because it's such a small sample size, right? But
Right.
I didn't get any sales like through Danlanders, which were you have that for sale banner up there and it goes
Hmm.
off to a Danlander or whatever. I didn't have any sales through that, but my sales through Afternic went up significantly in that month. So
Interesting.
I don't know if that was just coincidence, probably just coincidence, but I think that there is some kind of like a if you're interested in a name, you see a for sale landing page and you think, oh, it's for sale. I'm sure it will be for sale next month or whatever. And then suddenly you see it switch to like a page that's got advertisements on, might even have advertisements for competitors and something like that. It might
Hmm.
change your perception and say like, hey, okay, I'm going to try and lock this up. I saw it for sale on GoDaddy last month. Is it still there? Or something like that. I don't know. Maybe.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's interesting. I hadn't. One thing I had noticed, or my perception seemed was that when I parked my portfolio, that my Dan sales went down.
Hmm.
And because even though, like you said at the top, it had a link that would take you to the Dan Lander, I felt like and it could have just been variance. I mean, you realistically, while when you have a portfolio of a certain size, you do have predictable sell through rates, but there is also a pretty wide variance in there.
Yeah.
So it could have been variance, but I left my names parked for a good 5 months, and I earned decent money. I mean, I probably had you know several $1,000s, um, but it was spread so widely. A lot of it was like just a few cents on some names, and then some that really earned. And I just felt like at the end of the day, I would leave the ones that paid for themselves and more parked, and put everything else back on put everything back on Dan, and enable the BOTUS hybrid parking pages if they got with a pretty high threshold, so that if something takes off and there's like it's all of a sudden going to be it's a getting runaway traffic for some unknown reason, and I've had that happen, that it would at least then pop and I would notice it,
Okay.
and I can make an informed decision about it. I mean, I had a name that went from earning zero to earning me $300 in a matter of a week or two.
Oh yeah,
Um,
I remember you talking about that. That was legit.
but then it dwindled to nothing.
Yeah.
And so what had happened is that there had been some bad backlinks, that something happened around the SLD on a different TLD. It was a .club. Somebody had put an active site up on a .club version of my.com. And I think that there had been some webmasters that had linked to that site and out of habit put in .com in the link, and it just earned like crazy for a few days. So, I know that I'm going to miss out on that type of stuff by not parking all my names, but I just feel like, after a 5-month experiment, that the loss of sales probably outweighs the earnings on the bulk of them. Some of them, the ones that earn well, I'll
Yeah.
continue to leave there.
Yeah. Makes sense. So are you trying out the new GoDaddy landers?
Um, I don't have plans to at the moment. I like I like Dan in the fact that um, it's kind of my way of dollar cost averaging my crypto holdings.
Yeah.
so it instead of setting up a regular buy on Coinbase, I just set my Dan
Yeah, but
sales
the
to
problem is that every time I get paid out on Dan, they pay me out at all-time highs.
yeah, exactly. I think those guys are sitting around waiting for the daily high or the weekly high to pay you out.
I know.
And I have made the joke before. I said, you guys are welcome for the spike in Bitcoin, because I had some payments coming from Dan today, and I'm sure that's completely related. But at the end of the day, the GoDaddy lander, if I hear from other people that they're having good luck with it, I might try it out. In fact, I might even try it out on the partnership portfolio. I just, for my sanity and my housekeeping, I kind of want to be all or nothing on what my landers are.
Mm,
For my personal portfolio, if they're all on Dan, I want them to be all on Dan. And if they're all somewhere else, I want it to be somewhere else. But if I put the partnership portfolio over to the GoDaddy landers and see good results, then that might be something that will entice me to moving over. But I think
yeah.
that the lack of a payment plan, I think, will hurt sales a little bit. So we'll have to see how it goes.
Yeah. Yeah. Hmm. Yeah, I agree. The lack of a payment plan. I think that the landers look okay. I thought it was interesting that they said that the form fill is still going to be the better option above $1,000. I don't understand how they've come to that conclusion, but they said they obviously tested it for a while, and I assume that that's based on data.
You would hope so. I mean, um, you know, obviously Afternic has a staff of brokers, and it's hard for me to imagine that they would, put these Ben Landers out there and potentially reduce the workload for them. I mean, I'm not saying that the current staffing levels influence their decision to make that statement in there, but
That is true.
um, it's I can't imagine that even subconsciously it wasn't a factor in them doing that. And if you want to have a data proven outcome, the best way to have it do that is to go in thinking that's what it's going to prove, because
That is
you're
so
going
true.
to you're going to figure out a way to make it to prove what you think, if you're not going into it and being really empirical about it.
That is so true. If you're part of the GoDaddy staff that is a sales rep at Afternic, you don't want to see these GoDaddy buy it now landers doing too well. It's like,
Right.
I mean, that's your job, right? If there's this buy it now button that does as good as or a better job than you, that's no bueno. Um, but I don't know. I just, for me, I find it really hard to believe that in that $1,000 to $5,000 range, a form fill is gonna be better than a buy it now, buy it now page like that. I find it. I feel like every other data point from every other landing page company and portfolio holder that I've ever spoken to has said otherwise.
No, I'm with you on that. I mean, I think that I would have a hard time wanting to put a sub $5,000 name on an inquiry lander. Um, Mostly because I mean, I typically don't take offers on names under 5K.
Yeah.
And so I really don't want to necessarily do that. But yeah, I agree with you. I mean, if everybody else is saying, 5K and below is good with a bin, it is curious as to why this information comes out and contradicts that.
Yeah, I mean, their justification is that even if you just have a buy it now and you're not looking to negotiate, it's the fact that when someone fills out a form and they get in touch with a sales rep or they make a phone call and the sales rep's able to kind of say to them like, hey, this is the price, this is why it's the price, and go through all the standard sales techniques that you do to get someone to buy, that it's going to increase the chance of a sale. But what I don't quite understand, or I'm not sure if they fully consider the amount of people that simply just are not interested in picking up the phone or filling out a form fill. And me personally, I'm not that interested in doing that kind of thing as a buyer, and I know a lot of other people that aren't as well. They just want to be able to go through the process without having to speak to someone, and I think that's becoming more and more the case every single day that passes. Less people want to talk with human beings. So and I think there's a lot of data out there that supports that. So yeah, that's my thing.
No, I totally get it. If I'm looking for some kind of tool to do something, and I go to your SaaS page and I see the contact form that I have to give you my phone number in order to see the price, yeah, I'm moving on. I'm finding a competitor. I know when I give you my phone number, you're going to send me some smarmy sales rep to try and tell me how they can solve all my problems. And I'm just looking for something to do this particular function, and I'll go find it somewhere else where they put the upfront pricing. So yeah, I kind of get that too. I mean, like I probably wouldn't buy it if I wasn't a domain investor, was starting a business, I probably wouldn't inquire about a domain that had a contact form. But if it had a buy it now price that was a price that I was willing to pay, sure, I'd pull the trigger.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
it's easy to think of, everybody thinks like we do, and so obviously there are people that have done very well. I'm thinking about like Abdul Bassett, who has done extremely well with the contact form. So
yeah,
I don't know. I don't think one size fits all. I think for the kind of names I have, at least from my standpoint, the level of success I'm having doing things the way I'm doing it now is okay. Does that mean I don't want to get better at it? Absolutely not. Sure, I do. But I don't know that I want to make a change based on somebody else's success when they have their own names and their own style of buying and their portfolio. And I'm seeing what I want to, I'm seeing the successes that are acceptable to me out of mine doing things this way.
Yeah. No, I get you.
Get money. Let's get money.
Media Options is the industry's leading domain broker specializing in domain acquisitions, high-value domain sales, and domain name consultation. As pioneers and thought leaders on the subject of the domain aftermarket and domain name value, plus through their clear domain acquisition service, Media Options offers startups and established corporations an unparalleled scope of high-value domain options, providing access to domain names and curation technologies not available elsewhere. Media Options believes in the power of a great domain name and is dedicated to helping you obtain yours. Call or email today to put a domain to work for you.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about your portfolio sale that you brought it up a couple times, and I haven't really heard any kind of content out there talking about a portfolio sale. Typically you hear about the large portfolios like Marchex and the Birkin's portfolio selling to GoDaddy. I mean, we're not talking that level, but you had a nice little portfolio sale, right?
I did. It was interesting because I'd never really seen that kind of thing either. And a broker friend of mine, it was Tess Diaz, and her and Kate had, Buckley through Tess had contacted me. They knew I had a fair number of names, just from our personal relationship, and they said they had a buyer that was looking to buy names, and they had a certain budget, and they gave me some idea of what they were looking for, and I submitted and there was a little bit of a time crunch on it, so I submitted a portion of my portfolio that I identified initially, and it was like on a Friday, and then the next week I realized that there was maybe a little more time, so I actually put together a secondary portfolio of the partnership names and some and an addendum to the names I had submitted for my own portfolio. And it went through a process of a couple of weeks of things under consideration. I'd heard a couple times that, the buyer was liking, this, or the buyer was liking that. And eventually, they came back to me with with a subset of my names from the combined two submissions that the buyer was interested in, and we negotiated a little bit, and in the end wound up selling around 1,100 names.
1,100 names. That's really cool. Did you price your names based on like an average per name, or how did you price the names?
Yeah, it was in effect. I just looked at my sell through rate versus my average sell through price, and kind of what I was willing to let the names go for rather than keep them. And
Mhm.
so, in the end, it wound up being a multiple of my average cost, that I wound up getting, and obviously a number that was agreeable to me. I can tell you that it wasn't like an industry. I wouldn't say it wasn't a liquidation price sale. And
Mhm.
if I had to say, I felt like it was probably in the upper realm of the wholesale pricing, if on an individual basis. But I mean, we found a number that worked for the buyer and worked for me, and I was just thrilled to make it. And it was a great process going through it. And one of the things that that Tess had told me that really helped was I had some really solid numbers that I could point out about that type of name. I mean, there's a lot of discount drops, a lot of back orders, full price back orders at snap names and drop catch. So the acquisition cost was not through the roof. There may have been a couple of several $100 names in there, but they averaged out. And one thing I had said when I submitted it was like, I can't sell at this average price if it's cherry picked. And
Mhm.
while obviously they returned to me a subset of what they wanted from my submission, I immediately compared what they wanted to some metrics, and I didn't see where they had cherry picked it. And I think that maybe they were using the GoDaddy evaluation as part of it, because like Estabot, the average Estabot for the overall submission and what they purchased was almost spot on the same.
Mhm.
The GoDaddy, there was a little bit of a bump in the GoDaddy uh, average GoDaddy valuation over what they purchased versus the overall, set of what had been submitted. But the average cost, it wasn't like they ran name bio or something, bulk search and picked out the ones that had cost me the most, because the average cost was very similar to the average cost of the entire portfolio. So, while I'd said no cherry picking, at the end of the day, there were certain things about these names that the buyer liked, whether it was, average search, I don't know what it was, CPC, average search, number of extensions taken. I'm not privy to what they were looking for, but I was satisfied. We had a little bit of a negotiation, a couple back and forths, settled on a total number for the portfolio that I was happy with, and made the sale.
So and these are like low end names, right? 1100,
Yeah.
like low end names, like you said, discount drops and drops. What, without saying like what you sold them for from an average price point, what would you say would be a successful kind of target price for a domain investor that's buying those type of names and has interest, and someone has interest in, buying the portfolio? Would you say like 75 to $100 a name is kind of in the realm of what would be a good price if you were looking to sell a portfolio of that size?
I can tell you that my names, I sold for higher than that.
Okay.
I don't want to get too specific because I already said it was 1,100 names, and if I give you an exact price, people are going to be doing the math and counting my money. But but at the end of the day, I did pay a little bit. I did get more than that, and I think that more than anything, the sale represents about 2 years of an hour a day or more of work.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and so, whether my acquisition cost was X percentage of what I got, my labor cost was at least as much as the acquisition cost, from a standpoint of, for 2 years, I had an alarm and a reminder in my phone at 1:20 in the afternoon to submit drops. And I did that every day, day in and day out. And, that's, it's like Shane with training, or anybody. You have to be consistent. You have to do the things that other people aren't doing to get the results that other people aren't getting. And literally every single day for at least 2 years, I was calling through these lists, putting in there. And in the end, that's, it paid off. And I was thrilled with it, because I never expected to have a bulk sale like that.
Yeah.
And it was a nice capital infusion. It really changed my financial situation in a sense, because I first thing I did was I'm transferred 3,400 names. And let me tell you what, having everything at limiting the number of registrars you have stuff at. Oh my gosh, what a weight, and what a work saver that is.
Where did you consolidate to?
I moved everything to Dynadot.
Okay.
I'm a big fan of Dynadot. I always liked them, but they weren't one of my primary registrars. Just because it seemed at the time that I'm never going to not have names at GoDaddy. That's just, GoDaddy's always going to be a primary registrar, but I just find the interface and the capabilities of the back end, the management console, to be better at Dynadot, and I didn't want to have all my eggs in one basket either. So they had a decent special running, $77.99 transfers, and I just wired them a really big lump of money. and did a whole bunch of transfers. So that was what I spent April doing.
Nice. Yeah, no, I totally agree. When you can, minimize the amount of registrars that you're using, it, especially with a large portfolio, it certainly makes life easier. I'm not the best at tracking names, and sometimes names get lost. They really do. It's just tough, you've got that, especially when you've got 10,000 accounts at Network Solutions and you don't even know where.
Oh my gosh. Oh, and they just gave me a new account the other day for a purchase, and I'm like, why? I've got 4 already. Could you not work it into one of those? And then I go to consolidate, and it's like, oh, this is going to do it. This is going to initiate a 60-day lock. And I'm like, really?
Yeah.
I would rather just let it be I'll put a reminder in my phone to transfer it on day 61 and hope that nothing, and then, oh yeah, don't get me started on network solutions.
Yeah, I totally get it, man. So, it sounds like you said, you had a decent capital infusion. Are what's the go forward strategy now? Is it okay? I've figured out what I'm good at here. Do you go straight back to, replenishing that inventory, and kind of doing so as quickly as possible? Or do you now say, I've got some money here, I'd like to focus and maybe buy one or two bigger names? What are you looking at?
Well, that is a thought that I have had, and I will likely be on the lookout for something good. But my comfort level at determining whether it makes sense to spend 20K on a name is not the highest. I mean, that's the most I've spent on a name ever, and that's you were there when I bought it, fresh food at the at the at the
Oh, yeah.
at the NamesCon auction in Austin, and I just feel like having that much capital tied up in one name, and in retrospect, I probably overpaid for that a little bit. It was the auction, excitement and whatnot. It's easy to get caught up in that. I mean, I don't regret the purchase, but at the same time, locking up 20K for until that name sells is tough. And so,
Yeah.
so I am on the lookout for something that I think is a good deal. I haven't started, the process of contacting and trying to find these names from private owners yet. That's something that's on my radar. But more than likely, honestly, I feel like maybe doing a few wholesale flips leading up to buying the bigger names to hold until end users come along is probably where I'm leaning right now.
Yeah.
Just because that way I can use some capital, generate more capital, and then use the capital that was generated to buy the big name.
Yeah. No, yeah, no, I completely get that. I think that also the benefit of kind of doing a few wholesale flips and the bigger names is beneficial, because you just start to get a little, acquainted with that, area of investing, which is slightly, it's different. It's a different ballgame.
Right. Yeah. I just, every once in a while I'll see a name and I'm like, I'll run it by somebody and they're like, yeah, it's overpriced. I'm like, man, it seemed like a great deal to me. and so I don't have the confidence level in buying 5-figure names that I do in buying, 2, 3, and 4-figure names.
Yeah.
And like I said, at the end of the day, if I'm paying enough for a name that I could get 1,000 names that I'm good at buying for, then I'm probably going to make more money. It's going to be more profitable in the long run to buy those 1,000 names. And as I have noticed with consolidating at one registrar, if you can take the overhead of having to keep track of a bunch of names at different places off your plate, then managing more names is possible. So, my workflow is going to be buy names, get them to Dynadot, and then my overhead of maintaining the portfolio will go down.
Yeah.
And so that means I can have more names, and a bigger portfolio means a more predictable income, steadier sales.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I mean, managing your workflow to a point where it's scalable is super, super important when you've got a large portfolio, right? And I think registrar consolidation is certainly a big part of that. The way that you consistently buy names, and the way that you sell names, and the way that you price names, all of those kind of things. If you can make that workflow consistent and easier and less time consuming, at the end of the day, it's not a bad idea to calculate, your sales on an hourly basis. So you figure out, what you've done in a year and how much time you put in. And yeah, I mean, I completely agree with that. And in regards to, looking to, buy more names at the lower level, I say play to your strengths. If you feel like you're strong in a certain area and you're doing well with it, why reinvent the wheel?
Yeah, and that's really the conclusion that I've come to in the time since the portfolio sale. I mean, I've gone through and I paid up for a few names, and afterwards, I'm uneasy about the ones I paid up for, and I'm sure they'll be fine. And I know that if I'm uneasy now, all I have to do is look back in a year, and I'll be like, man, I can't believe I got that name for that price, because that's what happens now. Names I think we overpaid for in 2019, I'm like, man, I know I couldn't get that name now. So that's one lesson I have learned is if you feel like you overpaid, just wait.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, I'm not gonna. I can't spend $5,000 a day on names.
Yeah.
For long.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
that budget wears out pretty quickly.
yeah, and so like it's exactly what you said. I realize what my strength is, and I'm gonna play to it.
Cool. Well, Jason, before we wrap up, are you still working with Mike in DN Academy related stuff? I saw that Keith DeBurr is doing a bit of DN Academy stuff as well now. Are you still a part of that?
Absolutely. In fact, we are lining up to do a number of accelerators. We've kind of got a schedule laid out. The next one is going to start in June, early June. So we'll be you'll be seeing about that. Some announcements and signups for that coming in May. So we'll spend May signing people up, and then it'll kick off in June. And I will actually be lead instructor starting with the one in June. And Mike will kind of flip roles. He was lead instructor, and I was, we were co-instructors, but he really did take the lead for most of the first one that I helped him on. And so we're gonna flip the script, and I'll be the lead instructor and see how that goes, and then hopefully do another one in the fall.
Very cool, very cool. Well, congrats on that. I think that you'll be a great. I think that you are, and you will be a great lead instructor for the people coming into DN Academy and people taking that accelerator course. So, if I was getting started in the industry, I would definitely come and do it. So, congrats on that.
Thank you.
All right. Well, I'll let you go. We've been here for a little while. I appreciate you sharing all of that stuff with us and all the info. Was there anything else that you wanted to mention before I wrap things up?
No, I mean, I think we covered about everything that I had thought about talking about. So it was great talk. Good talking with you again. Good to be on the podcast, and take care.
And by the way, for anyone that comes on the podcast in the future, Jason, you can attest to the fact that we don't really have much like lined up before we get started, but plenty of conversation flows from start to end. It just kind of sprouts off in lots of directions, right?
Oh yeah, exactly. I mean, I was trying to think of some stuff. What do I need to be ready to talk about, and didn't really happen. I didn't put anything together, and we just kind of went off and talked about stuff that domainers talk about. And, and it was a good conversation. I mean, I learned stuff today, and I hope the viewers and listeners do as well.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you jumping on, man. So that'll be it for today on Digital Fortune under the DomainSherpa Network. Thanks a lot for joining me, Jason, and thanks everyone for listening.
All right, take care.